Hey everyone, welcome to another video. Today we're going to talk about issue number 1 of NYX From the Ashes, written by Colin Kelly and Jackson Lansing and art by Francesco Mortarino. But before we dive into the story, I want to ask you a favor. If you enjoy this video, please leave a like and a comment to help the channel grow. Kamala's whole life, she had watched this city shine from across the Hudson River. So she would sometimes imagine herself walking its streets, flying through its skies. Now many people have a million terrible things to say about New York, but the city in her mind is a just out of reach place that shined a light into her bedroom window from what felt like a whole world away. So what she tried to say was it felt like destiny. Now in her colorful thoughts, New York transforms into a vibrant and surreal place, filled with kaleidoscopic patterns and abstract shapes. Does that sound stupid? I hope that doesn't sound stupid, she muses, as she worried about how her thoughts might be perceived. Like, I love Jersey City. It'll always be my home, obviously, Kamala admits. But the world is so much bigger, and so is she, especially now. And it kind of feels like me and the city are going through the same thing. Now following that on the next page, we see Kamala enlarging herself, leaping gracefully across the George Washington Bridge. Cars honk and drivers gape as she strides past them. Whoa. Okay, here we go, she mutters as excitement bubbles up inside her. So as she swings through the city, she took out her phone and calls an old childhood friend by the name Bruno and starts to tell him what was going on in her life. Kamala started by saying, "You'll be happy to know that I'm enrolled in some after-school programs. But come on, it's such a cool program, and it's even taught by an ex-X-Man, like, a legit lived on Krakoa and did the whole thing X-Man. Anyway, wow, I'm a terrible friend with one heck of a monologuing problem apparently," she admits as she zips through the cityscape. Now just to add some context to this story, currently Kamala really misses Bruno due to the fact that he is currently studying in Amsterdam. So with him being far away, she is now left to deal with the reality of their separation. So anyway, getting back to the story, we pick back up with Kamala landing in a quieter part of town, and without wasting any time, she changes her outfit to help maintain her identity. So with everything in place, she whispers how much she misses Bruno and hung up the phone and took in a deep breath and said here goes nothing as she turns a corner out of the alleyway. And to her surprise, Kamala walked right into a special someone. She stumbles into SOPHIE CUCKOO, one of the step-forward cuckoos. So as all of Kamala's belongings scattered onto the ground, Sophie used her own mutant abilities to catch hers mid-fall. So as the two women looked eyes, Kamala looked at her with surprise on her face and blurted out, "You're SOPHIE CUCKOO, and I'm a big fan," she admits, to which Sophie, surrounded by her telekinetically controlled textbooks, used her power once again to lift Kamala back to her feet and said, "Well then, apology accepted Kamala Khan, you know, I was there at your coming out party before the fall," referring to the Hellfire Gala. So because of all the trauma around that event, every mutant knows her for better or worse. Now with that statement, Kamala slightly freaks out as she tells Safina that she still has a secret identity, so it would be a big help if she keeps it down. So with that out there, Sophie asked Kamala if it was so much of a secret that she couldn't be seen hanging out with a known mutant. To which Kamala responds with excitement by saying she thinks she misheard her because she thought Sophie just asked her to hang out with her. To which Sophie telepathically replied by saying, "Of course, you are one of the only other mutants in this school and we weirdos gotta stick together." Now after a blink of an eye, both Kamala and Sophie started to walk to class. And when they got there, they were met by Prodigy giving a lesson. And during said lesson he stated, "At the heart of it is this, mutants were an endangered community that had spent an inordinate amount of time doing one thing above all else, protecting its oppressor. And this is essentially inarguable, no matter what some of your parents think. The government of the United States financed the creation of, and actually deployed, giant killer robots against the mutant population. In fact, they were killing us and even hunting us. And yet we protected them in the most colorful outfits we could manage, looking brilliant under the weight of the entire world. And that was Charles's dream, that every mutant keeps forever. Now despite what the news would have you believe, Krakoa was inevitable, it was necessary, and I'm going to ask everyone in this class to respect that and treat it with empathy. But ultimately what was Krakoa? Will it become as its cultural institutions, its language, its religion integrate with the human world? In this class, that's exactly what will be," and right before he could finish his statement a voice interrupted Prodigy's question and called it a load of bull. Because out in the audience, Sophie was not happy, because she went on to say, "Is that really how it's going to be, Prodigy? Are you going to write the gravestone before the body even turns cold?" Now this was the last thing Prodigy wanted to happen because he corrected Sophie and informed her to call him Mr. Elaine. Now the fact that Prodigy was the teacher caught Kamala off guard. So with that revelation in place, Sophie informed Kamala that she had known him since Westchester, and if he wanted to build an ivory tower, then he would have to deal with her throwing rocks at its window. Now following that statement, Sophie went on to say, the youngest professor in the history of the school, tenure track even, which is a wonderful handout. Because do you really think they did that because of your many academic qualifications, or so they could feel a little less guilty about the last mutant massacre? Now with that statement out before the whole class, Sophie finished her outburst by saying that Prodigy is now the one protecting the oppressor, so she couldn't help but to wonder does it bother him at all. Now on the next page we see Kamala Khan and Sophie Cuckoo walk down the steps of a building in New York City, discussing Sophie's experiences at Xavier's Institute for Higher Learning. Now following that, Kamala then mentions, I gotta get home to Jersey City with my parents. Sophie, understanding the complexities of Kamala's dual identity, suggests, yes, that secret identity life. Tell me they know, at least, about your X gene? To which Kamala unfortunately replied by saying they do not know she is Ms. Marvel, or even a mutant. So with that said, Sophie encourages Kamala and said, I hate that for you and she should call them right now and tell them that you've got a study group with a new best friend and you'll be home late. Kamala hesitates, thinking about her parents. But what if they don't believe me? Asked Kamala. To which Sophie firmly responds by saying, we do not wait, but if she is not allowed to be a mutant, then at least she should be allowed to be young. Kamala Khan and Sophie Cuckoo find themselves standing in front of a bustling nightclub, and when they get there, Sophie glances at Kamala with a mischievous smile. Wait, this is never gonna work, Sophie said as she surveyed Kamala. Because we're both suddenly realizing that we're underage and there is no way that large man is going to let me in, responded Kamala with a worried look on her face. So with that said, Sophie let out a laugh and said, no, that's easy to fix. I just don't want you walking in there dressed for a bake sale. Now that made Kamala chuckle, and replied by saying, none taken, because she literally has cookies in her pocket. A bouncer stands at the entrance, arms crossed. Sophie confidently approaches him. Ladies, you've got to go to the back of the line. But before he could say it, Sophie interrupts him and uses her abilities on him. And within a snap of a finger, the bouncer changed his whole tone and said, absolutely, go right ahead, and have a great night. Now with the deed done, the bouncer, momentarily thrown off, steps aside as Sophie leads Kamala past him with a smug grin. Now once inside, Kamala and Sophie made their way through the crowded nightclub and approached a bar, where a familiar green-skinned bartender was shaking up a cocktail. And upon getting there, Sophie leaned over the bar and allowed her voice to rise over the pulsating music in order to be heard. And once they were there, Sophie introduced Kamala to the former bartender from the Green Lagoon by the name ANOLE. Kamala, a bit out of her element, says, hi, I don't drink, but it's nice to meet you. The bartender chuckles and acknowledges her with a friendly nod as he hands Sophie a drink. Now with the drink in hand, the two girls move away from the bar to find a spot to talk. And as they walked, Sophie asked what Kamala thought about the club. To which Kamala, taking in the atmosphere, replied by saying, it's very loud. Now this causes Sophie to raise an eyebrow and say it's quieter on the dance floor. Now that statement caused Kamala to look confused, because that didn't make any sense to her. Sophie, with a knowing smile, says, girl, I'm a telepath, so believe me when I say, you think too much. So as the girls were about to enter the dance floor, a confrontation broke out at the bar, as a young man aggressively pointed at ANOLE and called him a freak, to which ANOLE replied by saying, hey, come on, this is my job, man, can we not do this? But unfortunately, the aggressive man continued and said it's just a question. So with a phone in hand, the aggressive man continued to record ANOLE and called him a mutie terrorist. So with tension escalating, the aggressor went on to say, a building uptown collapsed by Columbia due to a fire. But just as he was saying that, another man entered the scene and shouted how it wasn't a mistake because it's happening every night and the mutants are behind it. So in an attempt to get a false confession, the second man took out a huge knife and was moments away from doing something he would regret. Meanwhile, Sophie and Kamala watch from a distance as Sophie assesses the situation and says, they've got cameras out, secret identity. Just stay cool. Kamala, feeling the weight of the moment, took her hand and wrapped her face as she listened to Sophie and adds, there's something you gotta understand if you want to be my friend, and that is I'm never cool. Kamala Khan's patience snaps as the situation at the bar escalates. Her arm stretches out, slamming into the aggressive man with surprising force. Now this caused the bar to erupt into chaos as the people around them reacted with shock and confusion as the aggressive man was now nursing a bloody nose. Now following that, the original aggressor took his same phone and started to record the incident as his voice was filled with outrage. You are seeing it live, truth seekers, mutant violence, right here in New York. So don't trust the lies, they're not immigrants, there. Before he can finish, Sophie uses her mutant power to take the phone from his hand. Hey, he yells, but his protest is cut short as Sophie intervenes, attempting to defuse the tension. How's this for the truth? You suck, Kamala retorts as her frustration boils over and led to a thunderous blow to the cameraman's stomach. So with that going down, a masked figure appears in the confusion and attacks Kamala with an electrical shock. But she managed to block his blows, but the scuffle was intense and chaotic. So with another person down, a hand grabbed Kamala's shoulder, and just like the last three challengers, Kamala elbowed him in the face as well. Now this was a mistake because the man who grabbed her was the bouncer, and no one punches the bouncer. Now with the bouncer towering over the scene. It's not what it looks like, said Kamala as she tried to explain herself. Now on the next page, we see Kamala Khan's head hit the ground with a thud as her vision momentarily blurred from the impact. What the actual, mutters Kamala as she tries to comprehend the sudden turn of events. Now outside the club, we see the bouncer walking away as Kamala transitioned to a sitting position. Those guys were harassing your bartender, and one of them had a damn Bowie knife in a nightclub. And she's the one you're throwing out? She was trying to help, shouted Sophie as her voice was filled with frustration and disbelief. The bouncer, unimpressed, responds by saying, "No mutants, new rule." Following that, Sophie kneels beside Kamala with concern etched on her face. "Are you okay? We can go to another club. I'm like a walking fake ID," she offers as she tries to comfort her friend. Kamala, still dazed but determined, shakes her head. "No, it's okay. This is really more your scene than mine. Sophie, I appreciate your help and the effort and the whole thing. But you heard that guy. There are mutants and people in trouble out there, and someone needs to help." Sophie wraps her arm around Kamala, offering support. "I get it, just be careful, okay," she says, her voice softening. Now following a nod, Ms. Khan announced that Kamala was done for the night, but Ms. Marvel is just getting started. And later on that night, we see Ms. Marvel high above the city, looking for people in need of help. Now as that is playing out, on the next page we see Prodigy sitting at home while having a conversation while eating. Until out of the blue, Prodigy gets a phone call that interrupts his meal. So with the phone in hand, Prodigy answers by saying, "Hello, if this is a student, you should know that I limit my office hours to when I'm actually in the office." To which the voice on the other end of the phone responded by saying, "Professor Allen, can you hear me? This is Kamala Khan. I'm in your class. We met at the Hellfire Gala once." Kamala's voice came through the speaker, urgent and breathless. Professor Allen's eyes widened in recognition as Kamala went on to say, "I'm Ms. Marveling, and I know you're the Weird Skills X-Man, so question, do you know how to unlock a cell phone that's not yours?" "I can't get the facial recognition quite right," Kamala continued, her words tumbling out quickly. Allen adjusted his glasses, focusing intently as Kamala continued to say, "So you know how we have these new truth seekers in town? Well, I just fought a few of them, and long story short, I took one of their phones. And now I can see when they're planning to pin the next crime on mutants and catch them in the act," Kamala explained. So with that said, Professor Allen's expression turned serious as he replied by saying, "Kamala, I promise you, you know what you're doing better than I ever could. You're Ms. Marvel, so own that, and the decisions that come with it. Now I have to go back to dinner with my very patient boyfriend, okay?" A crackle from the phone indicated a disconnection. Professor Allen stared at it with concern etched on his face. "Kamala," he called out, but there was no response. Now on the next page, we see just why the phone was disconnected. Because on the next page, we seen Kamala Khan lying on the floor with Wolverine standing over her, with her phone completely destroyed. And by the looks of it, Laura was completely pissed off. Now the fierce look in Laura's eyes was a clear signal of the determination that surged through her veins. "You're chasing ghosts, Ms. Marvel. Go home before you get hurt," growled Laura dismissively. But to Kamala's credit, she stood her ground, unwavering. "I'm sorry, are you an Avenger?" she shot back, her voice steady despite the rising tension. "No, I'm an actual hero who looks out for the people who fall through the cracks. And reckless kids like you when you get too close," retorted Laura, as her expression hardened. People are preying on mutants every day, and you're starting bar fights and sitting in class while the real work goes down. You're not ready for this." Kamala's fists clenched at her sides. "I'm sorry, Wolverine's gonna lecture me about starting fights? The only thing I'm doing is trying to help our people, just like you." A flicker of surprise crossed Wolverine's face before it was quickly masked by a stern expression. "I just also have a family and school and even more school, and apparently I have a new best friend, and I just spend all day trying to live up to their expectations of me and still have time for what's right," echoed Kamala's voice through the room. She took a step closer, her eyes never leaving Wolverine's. "Being a mutant doesn't mean you don't get to have a life." So with that said, Wolverine shot back with a mix of frustration and determination and said, "Mutants and humans, after everything we've done. This city's about to explode. Get ready or get dead," Wolverine warned, as her eyes scanned the surroundings with sharp focus. Kamala watched as Wolverine leaped away, her silhouette disappearing into the shadows of the city. She sighed, feeling the weight of Wolverine's words. "Thanks, Wolverine," Kamala muttered to herself as her tone dripped with sarcasm. So as she clutched her phone, frustration bubbled within her. "Thank you so much for ruining my only lead on a case we both want solved because you have some kind of weird protector complex about me. Now how am I supposed to catch the truth seekers in the act?" Kamala's mind raced as she jumped to the floor below, but as soon as she got down there, a loud boom went off and a green glow flashed before Kamala's face. And on the next page, we see a gigantic explosion going off as Kamala quickly shields a few civilians from the fallout. Now with that dealt with, Kamala took this as an answer for her current issue, for she believed the truth seekers were behind it. Now following that, Kamala entered the destroyed building and moved swiftly through the debris-filled corridor as her eyes scanned for any sign of the truth seekers. "Hey, if you can hear my voice, come toward it because the exit's still good," she shouted as her voice echoing through the chaos. She turned a corner, her heart pounding as she saw a group of frightened civilians. "Hey, truth seekers, if there are any of you left down here, I know what you're up to and I'm not gonna let you pin this on mutants. I'm gonna show everyone exactly who you are." Kamala's voice was fierce, filled with determination. Now from the shadows, a voice echoed back, filled with disdain, and said, "But, Ms. Marvel, you have no idea who we are." Kamala's eyes widened as the voice continued. "After all, you never experienced the true promise of our nation, you never sat at our feasts, danced in our jungles, and worshipped at our church." Now her grip tightened as she listened, anger boiling inside her. "You missed the golden age and your birth was our end, now only I remain." Kamala's resolve hardened. She wasn't going to let them get away with this. She pushed forward, determined to protect those who couldn't protect themselves and expose the truth seekers for who they truly were. But when she turned the corner, she was shocked to see a man who was no truth seeker, but instead a mutant who carried the name the Krakoan. For in his word, he was the vengeance. So with anger in Kamala's heart, she couldn't help but to shout, "Are you kidding me? You're a mutant." To which, the Krakoan responds by saying, "More than you'll ever be." Now this right here is a big deal, because Kamala was so dead set on proving that the mutants were doing the right thing, but instead, she is confronted by this mess. To which the Krakoan continued to say, "Professor Xavier is gone and the X-Men are outlaws, and here you are worried about some human nothings," as he held a massive train car above his head. "You're a disgrace, but I will not sully myself by battling a traitor to her own people," the Krakoan continued while raising a gauntlet fist. So with that said, Kamala was caught off guard and shouted, "Wait, where are you going?" To which the Krakoan replied by saying the true question is, "Whose side are you really on?" as he tossed the train car directly at our hero. Now with an outstretched hand, Kamala caught the train as it flew her way. Kamala braced herself as the train screeched to a halt, the impact jolting through her body. She quickly assessed the situation, noting the frightened passengers inside. "There are no sides anymore, you maniac," she muttered, her eyes narrowing as she thought about the Krakoan's last words. Now with the people saved, Kamala landed on the platform as her voice ringed out clear and said, "Hey, everyone, careful getting out of the train, the metal's pretty sharp around the edges. An orderly line will do just fine, and we'll make sure everyone's okay." Now a wave of relief washed over the crowd as they followed her instructions. "Thank you, Ms. Marvel," one person exclaimed. Another chimed in and said, "Yeah, that was amazing." "Excuse me, Ms. Marvel, that was incredible, but I have just one question," a voice called out from behind her. Kamala turned to see a civilian holding a camera. And just like that he said, we're streaming live. Do you have any comment about how citizens can better confront the mutant menace? Any words of wisdom to any other gene freaks who might step out of line? Now with this sudden shock, Kamala was caught off guard as she was now being praised by the truth seekers, the same people she was dead set on taking down. Now following that, Sophie and Kamala sat in a quaint little cafe and shared a meal before going their separate ways. And on the next page, we see Kamala coming home extremely late, just to see her brother up late, waiting for her. And during their interaction, he warns her to be careful and watch out, because anyone, referring to mutants, could be a walking atomic bomb. So with that warning given, Kamala walks to her room for the night with a sense of uneasiness. So with that said, we transition over to a huge building in the heart of downtown. Welcome back, Krakoa. That was quite the show, murmured a mysterious man as the city's skyline, a mesmerizing dance of lights against the night sky, played in the background. So as the Krakoan exited the elevator, the man continued on to say, I'll be honest, I think it tops anything you ever did in the old days, with the exception of maybe sucking up to Miss Frost so much you literally named yourself after her favorite word. So thirsty, he taunted, a smirk playing on his lips. His companion chuckled, lifting a glass. What can I say? Power is an acquired taste, and I've damn well acquired it. Now I've been a sociopath, but I prefer king, retorted the mysterious man as he raised his glass. Suddenly a third voice interrupted their conversation and said, Boys, there's no use arguing now, the plan's in motion. We'll have our own island again soon, just take a drink and give us a toast, will you? He raised his glass higher, his smile widening. So here's to Krakoa, not the place that was, but the one this quiet council will build on these ruins. After all, evolution's already made the call. And on the last page we see, the identities of this new, quote-unquote, quiet council proclaim themselves to be next. And the members that is seen on this page is the Stepford Cuckoos, who is the problematic sisters of Sophie. The Krakoan, or the mutant better known as Hellion, a mutant that uses telekinetic abilities, and finally, we see him sitting on a throne. And with that said, this issue of NYX X-Men comes to an end. But anyway, down in the comment section below, let me know your thoughts about this issue and what predictions you could have moving forward. So with that established, I hope you enjoyed this video, and please don't forget to leave a like and a comment if you want to see more videos like this. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.